Hi everyone, it's Mario here with another Ruby 2D tutorial. In today's episode we're going to be creating a game which is going to be great fun. This will be the first episode where we're going to create a player that's going to be able to walk across the screen, and then we're also going to have a background that's going to scroll as the player moves. So I had a comment asking about how to make a scrolling background, so this video hopefully will run you through how to do that, and this will be the first in a series of creating a game. So I'm really excited. Let's have a look and see what we're going to be building in this first episode. So this is the start of the game that we're going to be building. As you can see, we've got our character here and we've got our background as well. So I'm going to hit the right key on the keyboard and you can see the background doesn't move, but the player moves. And then when we hit the edge, the background starts scrolling, which is awesome. We can walk all the way to the end and then the background will stop. And we can also use the left arrow keys to push the player to the left as well. So if you're walking in the center section, you can see the background's not scrolling, but as soon as you get to the edge, it starts moving with you. So let's get stuck in and have a look at some code. So my art skills aren't great, so I've tried to find some free online game assets. One website is opengameart.org. So I've searched for a hero, like a player image, as well as a background. So if you go to one of the hero images here, you can see that they've got different stills for each part of the animation, which is really important. So we're going to need that. And I'll show you how you can animate that using the Ruby 2D library. And then the other thing I've got is just a large wallpaper as well, which we're going to use. So you can see here in our hero, we've got 4 still frames, and they will make up the walking animation. And then we've got the background here. So where it's probably a bit big. I'll just see if I can shrink it down. So this is the background that we're going to use. Later on, we might move to a tile-based system instead, where we're going to create our background dynamically based on a bunch of tiles. But I think this is going to be a great starting point. So I've put those into the folder here. So let's get stuck in. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is just load our Ruby 2D library like so. And we're going to call the show method just to display on our screen. And we might start with the hero first. So we're going to create a sprite. If you want the instructions on how to do that, you can go to the Ruby 2D website and then hit the Learn tab. And all the information is under the Sprite section here. So in their example, they've got a coin which is animating, as well as a hero, like a player here as well. So we're going to do something similar with ours. Great, so the first thing we're going to do is load that image. So I'm going to say hero equals sprite.new. And I'm going to give it the location of the file. It's in the same folder and we've just called it hero.png. Okay, and let's see if we can show that on the screen. Cool, so it's showing our image, and the first thing we need to do is tell it about the fact that we have these 4 frames. So to do that, I'm going to need to get the information about the dimensions of the image. And for the image that we're using, if we have a look here, we can see that the dimensions are 1024 by 256. So because there's 4 still frames, each one is a square. It's 256 by 256. So we're going to need to plug that into Ruby 2D so it knows about the individual still frames there. So I'll just move this to a new line, just so we got a bit more room. And so we're going to set the width and the height, 256. And then let's see if that helps. And so we also need to set the clip width. 256 as well. So the clip height automatically gets set to the height of the sprite that you're using the image. So in our case, it's going to assume it's 2d6. So it assumes that your images are all in a row horizontally, which ours is. So that looks awesome. So that's our sprite. And the next thing to do is just simply play that animation. So we're going to do it on key press. Okay, so I'm going to say on key held. So there's a few different key events. So you can hook into when you press the key down on your keyboard, when it's held down, and when it's released. So we kind of want it to start walking when you have held down the key, and then the player should stop walking when you let go. So those are the two that we're going to hook into. So I'm going to say when you do that, we're going to say play. And okay, so I'm just holding down any key on the keyboard, and you can see that it's showing the right animation. So the next thing that we might want to do is make it so that when I press the left key that the animation will go left, and when I press the right key that the animation will go right. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to look at the event that happens. So when we hold the key down, we get this event object here, and that event will tell us which key is pressed. So I'm going to do a case on that. So we're going to say event.key. So event.key here contains the text left or the text right when I press the left or right arrow keys on my keyboard. So I'm going to say when it's left, we want to actually play the animation in reverse. So I'm going to say when it's left, flip horizontal. So that's the axis in which we want to flip it. We could also flip it vertical, but in our case, it doesn't make sense. And then when we're going right, we want to just play the animation straight. So I'm going to say when right, hero.play. And that's it. So let's give this a go and see what happens. So I've got a syntax error. It's telling me it's on line 14. Expecting equals. So line 14 is here. So I think this is this comma here. So I'm going to remove that. Okay. So we've got a sprite. I'm going to hold down the right key. So that's working just as before. I've let go and it stopped. I'm going to hold the left key now. And that's really cool. So it's flipped over and it's animating. And then when I let go, it does stop. So the one problem we have is when I let go, you can see that there's a little bit longer that it plays the animation because it plays it all the way to the end. And so I actually want to tell it to stop immediately when we lift our key off of the keyboard. So that's the next little bit. So here we're going to say on key up. And then here we're going to say hero.stop. And that should make it immediately stop the animation as soon as we lift up the key. Let's try that out. Okay, so it's a bit hard to see because you can't see my hands, but as soon as I lift off of the keyboard, it seems like the player does stop immediately. So that's working well. So I think the next thing to do is change the way that the player is positioned. So normally in a platformer, there's a section of the window, and so when you're in the center of it, the player will move, and then when they get to the end, they kind of stop. The background tends to only scroll when you kind of hit the end of the screen and you're kind of pushing it. And so the first thing we're going to do is with our hero, we're just going to make them walk. And then when they get to the edge of the screen, then they'll kind of stop walking. We don't want them to walk off the edge. So let's do that. Okay, so we're going to hook into these left and right key presses. So when we create this sprite, by default, the X value, we haven't provided it here, but the X is 0, so that's the horizontal positioning. And we don't actually want to go anywhere negative, so we don't want to go past 0. So I'm going to say that we can only go left if where our x is more than 0, because in that case we're further to the right and we can move left. So I'm going to say if my hero.x is greater than 0, so we've already moved to the right, then we can move left. And the way we do that is just by modifying the x value. So I'm going to take 1 away from that x value. So hero x minus equals 1. So take 1 away from that and reassign it back. So let's actually, before we try that out, we might do the right as well. So let's do that. So to figure out if we're at the end of the screen, we need to figure out the size of the window. I haven't specified them here, so let's maybe do that before we go any further. So I'm going to say the width is 800 and the height here is going to be 600. And so now we know that the width is going to be 800 here. So we're going to say if the hero x is less than 800, then you can move to the right. And I can actually use a method here to get the width, because if I change it later, I don't want to be changing it in a few different places. So I can say window.width, and that should provide me the same 800 value. It just means that I can change it in one spot here. So if the hero is less than the window width, and then also we need to take the size of the hero, the width of the hero, because if we do this, the hero would be able to walk just off screen and we want them not to be able to hit it. So if you imagine you've got 800 wide and the hero itself takes up some room, so we have to kind of take that away from this window width here. So I'm going to say if hero x is less than window width, take the width of the hero. Then we can move right. So I'm going to say hero.x plus equals 1. Okay. Let's try it out. So I'm going to hold the right arrow first and then walking just very, very slowly. I might increase that speed in just a second. Actually, let's do that. I'm going to close this. I think the same thing here. I'm going to make a variable, so walk speed. Let's set it to maybe 4, just so we don't have to keep on changing it in multiple places. Okay, let's try that. So I'm holding the right arrow now, and you can see that's really cool. So they've stopped at the end. This sprite is actually a bit bigger than the character. You can see here there's just some space on either end. So the fact that they're not quite hitting the edges just because of that, the way that sprite works. So let's try left, see if we get stuck. Very good. So we could tweak that a bit if we wanted to, just by changing that image and cutting out the character a bit more, but I'm pretty happy with that for the moment. So next thing is going to be changing the background. So just like we've loaded our sprite, if we want to get a bit of help, there is a background section. Where is it? Images. So the way we set a background is just by creating an image. And it's going to look pretty similar to how we created our sprite. The options are pretty similar as well. So we're going to provide a background to the image.new. Okay, so I'm going to create a background. So I'm going to say background equals image.new. Our background is just called background.png. And that should be it. So that'll make it display. Let's try that out. Okay, so you can see here the size of the background is quite large. We could go and edit that image file, but I think just for to save us some time, I'm just going to shift the coordinates of the background. So I want to see the bottom of the background, so I'm going to change the y-axis, which is where it's positioned vertically. And from playing around already, I can tell you that the value that we want to set is around 920 negative, and that'll push the background, the top of the background off the top of the screen. Okay, cool. So that's working well. For some reason now I can't see the hero anymore, so we'll have to figure that out. I think it might be the order actually of the way we created things. So I'm going to take my background and I'm going to create my background before I create the sprite. Yes, that's worked well. So we can see we're walking on the background. The background's not scrolling yet, which is okay, but we're a little bit too high. So we want to move this this sprite further down, so we're kind of walking on this grass here. So just before I've been playing around with the positioning, and again I can tell you that it's around here. So we're going to move it 190 pixels further down. Cool, so you can see we're about level with the ground. This sprite's a little bit odd where I think the feet are at slightly different heights, but that's okay. And you can see that when I hold the buttons down, I'm walking. So the last thing to do is to change when the character gets to the end and they're walking, we want to scroll that background. So we want to move it left and right, just like we're moving our sprite across the screen. So let's do that. Okay, so when we're moving right, if the hero's off the edge, if the hero's in moving, then we run this logic. But if the hero is all the way on the edge, then we don't move the hero X position because it's already at the end. But that's the point where we actually do want to scroll that background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach an else to this if. So this is saying if the hero is still in the middle of the frame, move the hero, otherwise we're going to move our background. And we're going to say background X, and we're going to move the background the other way. So we're going to move the background to the left, which is a negative amount. So I'm going to say background take, and we're going to use this walking speed constant that we created before. Let's try that. So I'm going to walk all the way to the edge. You can see the background's scrolling, but the problem we're going to have is once we get to the end of the background, it's not going to stop. It's just going to keep on kind of moving that. And that's something that we want to fix. So we want to calculate when we're at this point, and where, and then we don't want to kind of keep on going. So we need another condition around this. So we're going to say if the background's X position is less than the background's width. So the X position of the background normally starts off at 0 again, and then we want to make sure that we're not going all the way off the edge. So let's try that. So I'm going to hold right again. That's not worked. Why has that not worked? Okay. So if the background's X position, so where is less? I think this might be wrong. So when we go to the right, the X position actually goes negative. So we need to say if the background is past negative the width. So let's say the background width is 1,000. If we keep going to the right, then when we're on the edge, the X would be negative 1,000. So I want to say if background X is less than negative background width, maybe that. Less than negative background width, okay. So I'm holding right, it's not worked. Okay, greater than, sorry. So if the x is greater than the negative width, okay. Good, so we're scrolling again. And hopefully once we get all the way to the end, it should stop. And it hasn't. I'm not too sure here, so I might put some debugging here, and we're going to print out what's happening, and then we can try and figure it out, basically. So I'm going to put a put statement in here, and we're going to print out the background x, and then we're going to print out background.width, and then we're going to run it and see what happens. Okay, so you can see it's happening in the background. The background width is 3072. And then we'll check at the point in which we get all the way to the end. Okay. So when we get to the end, so the problem we're having is when we get to the end, I think we also need to factor in the width of our window. So I think our calculation is right, but we just need to also say background X take the width. Yeah. If background X take window dot width, if that, okay. So I think that will now work. Let's try it out. Great, okay, that's much better. So we're getting to the end of that background and then we're stopping walking. The last thing to do is simply just make it scroll back to the left. So now that we've done the right, that should be easy enough, hopefully. So same kind of thing here. If the hero is not moving, then we're going to shift our background. And this one's a little bit easier because we're on the left-hand side, we don't have to worry about the width of the window. So the calculation to check if we're already there should be a bit easier. We're simply just going to check if the x is greater than 0 really of the background. So we're going to say if background x is less than 0, then we're going to add to the background. So background.x plus equals walking speed. Okay, so I'm not gonna walk all the way to the right, but once I start pushing it, I'm going to start walking back to the left. And hopefully if that's all worked, then it should stop like it is. Awesome, that's great. So I think that's good for this first session. We've got our character, they're managing to walk back and forth, and we've got our background scrolling. So I think we'll cut it there. So thank you very much. It's been fun. I'm really excited about building this game out over the course of these tutorials. I hope you had fun. The code is on GitHub. If you want to play around with it yourself, please leave any comments of anything you'd like to see in the added to the game. If you give me a like, that would be really positive. That really helps me out. Thank you very much. See you next time.